Good evening, family. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Sidewalk Talk. So, Sidewalk Talk is an online platform where we have real talk about the streets of Newark, New Jersey, to gain insight, clarify misconceptions, and get a call to action from frontline workers, right? So, we look to gain insight by having nuanced conversations that are often oversimplified, not necessarily being discussed the way it needs to, and unpacking truths that, are found in conversations not often being had. Then we look to clarify misconceptions about groups of people who are often unheard or misunderstood based on assumptions about their lives. And then the third objective that we have here tonight on Sidewalk Talk is to lift up the work of local organizations here in this mighty, mighty city of Newark, New Jersey, where we are doing unprecedented, radical, revolutionary boots on the ground work. And so we are, there's so many organizations throughout the city doing this kind of work. And so Sidewalk Talk wants to lift up that work, right? And lift up local organizations and then get a call to action by frontline workers who are experts on the particular topics that we're discussing. So they know best. They're in the trenches. They're on the ground. Even past, present, and future. What has it been? What is it now? Right? We look to kind of get that insight and calls to action, right? Because no offense to, I say this every time, no offense to emails or meetings, family, but we are past that. We are past that. We want to talk about action. And even when the guests give 3 calls to action, we often get far more than just 3. So I am excited to be here. This is season 2 of Sidewalk Talk. This is the 18th episode. 18th episode of Sidewalk Talk. So we have 2 more episodes to go in season 2, and then we will be taking a break until the launch of season 3. So I do, appreciate the support throughout these seasons. I am your host, Aaliyah Berry. For many of you who may not know me, let me take this opportunity to introduce myself. So I'm a licensed clinician. I have 20 years experience working with ages 0 to 60 in a variety of different settings. So I've been in daycares and after school programs and summer camps and schools, group homes, shelters, correctional facilities, a whole bunch of different settings working with a variety of different kinds of people. So I'm a community-based social worker. And so what that means to me, honestly, if you're watching this, and you are a provider or you do the community work that is necessary, then it's a lifestyle, right? It is not always within the 4 walls of an agency. It is not always between the hours of 9 to 5. So community-based social work to me means that I find myself at baby showers and graduations, also unfortunately at sentencing hearings or funerals, goal setting on the sidewalk, hugs at a red light. Right. I have a particular passion about serving individuals before, during, and after incarceration. And so with a special emphasis on art-based healing modalities and restorative justice. I currently work as a consultant with Seeds and Berries, doing program development, training, and direct clinical services in schools, nonprofits, and the government sector. So you can keep in touch with me on Facebook and Instagram, Seeds and Berries, myself, Aaliyah Berry at LinkedIn. Find out more about my services at seedsandberries.com. And then if you missed this episode live, you can check out this episode as well as the 17 episodes that we've already done with some dynamic guests. You can check that out on YouTube on the Seeds and Berries channel. So that's pretty much enough about me. Before I get into the topic, I just want to go over some brief housekeeping to tag, and share this live broadcast for impact, right? When you and love and laugh and do those kinds of reactions through the social platform, it helps me and my guests to not feel like we're alone in a room just kind of talking to each other, right? But the audience is able to interact in that way. As the conversation goes forth, if you feel that there's somebody that you feel would enjoy the conversation or be able to contribute, then tag them in the comments section and it will give them a notification to join. And then also share right? Share for impact, not for popularity. Myself and my guests are not concerned about popularity, but we do feel we have an important message for the audience today, and so we do want it to get into the hands that it needs to. So do share for impact. And then, of course, comment, right? Comment to add value to the conversation. Yes, my guest is an expert. I plan to be in class tonight. Get out your pens, your notebooks, because we are learning tonight. But there's a lot of you who also have expertise and experiences, and you can contribute to the conversation as well. Your contributions are valuable as well. So please do comment, and if you have any questions that you want me to ask, you can also put that in the comment section. Okay, so family, that is my housekeeping. That's enough about me. We are moving on. We are moving on to the introduction of my much esteemed guest on tonight, right? Because just a little background on Sidewalk Talk, right? So I come up with the topic, okay? And then I seek out through my Rolodex, right? I seek out the expert on that topic. So it is not the other way around. It is not, oh, I want to interview you. What should we interview you about? No. These are experts, and you can be sure of that when you come to Sidewalk Talk. They're the best of the best answering these particular topics, right? So this season, the theme has been strength, strategy, and service, right? Strength, strategy, and service was the season theme. And so we are moving along that vein. And so last month, in the month of December, we talked about community-based public safety. Community-based public safety, which is essentially public, safety in public hands. Right? And do we know our neighbors and our family members? And to what extent are we as individuals and residents keeping our own communities safe and doing our part, right? Pick a lane, play your part. That is the motto of Sidewalk Talk. So that's where we've come from. And then the last episode, we talked to Lionel Latouche at Equal Justice USA to talk about policing then, right? Because if the, police are still members of the community, one, and two, members of the public safety ecosystem, right? Now, Lionel talked about schools of thought, where there's the burn the whole thing to the ground, and then it's fine, leave it alone, and everything in between, right? At the end of the day, in the meantime, we need to then discuss how policing should go that's in the best interest of the community. Me and Lionel talked about that, which is why it's a great segue tonight to talk about community policing, and then not only to talk about this topic, but to talk about it with a retired law enforcement professional, to talk to a police officer, right? And so that police officer that I have with me tonight, his name is Russell Thomas. Snap it up for Russell. He is the CEO of Community Policing Solutions. He is also the host of a radio show on That Hub Life Radio. Shout out to the Hub. And his show is called Legends. And so why I, selected in the Rolodex, right, is because Russell has a long history of community policing and training his peers in community policing. Right? And so when we talk about what has been done already, because he's retired, so he has many years of building community policing when it probably wasn't even a thing. And I'm going to ask him about that. He was building something that people were like, wait, what? You want me to what? That's important. And to build off his history as, as policing evolves, in these modern times, to take some of that history and build off of it is important. And so without further ado, we're going to get this interview started with that kind of context in mind. And let's get Russell in here. Hello, Russell. Hello. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having me on Sidewalk Talk.
Yes, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Like I said, your expertise is valued. Even the expertise on the history that has brought us to this point of community policing. So I introduced you from the heart, but I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself, your history in law enforcement. How did you even want to become a police officer? Where did that come from? Introduce yourself how you see fit.
Okay, so Boy, there was a lot of questions in that introduction. I just want to know if I ever want to have another career, I'm gonna make sure you're the person that bring me out on stage. I'm just putting it out there right now. Um, Let me just go back a little further. I was in the Air Force and I was in the fire department, and I thought that being a fireman was interesting and it was all part of public safety. But if I was to come back home to New Jersey, to Newark, it wouldn't be in a fire station, it'd be in a police precinct. Now, luckily for me, when I came back out of the service, real quick, I had a young man that I knew, and he said, "Why don't you just take the police test?" Up until that time, I was like, "Well, I thought about it," but he gave me the impetus to go forward with it. A couple years later, we both got on and doing what we needed to do. Um, 25. Let me back up. 693 days ago, I retired from a career in law enforcement, Newark Police Department. And approximately a month after I retired from the biggest class Newark ever had, 187 Newark cops, I decided to go ahead and start Community Policing Solutions, which is basically a bridge, helps build partnerships from law enforcement communities and the public and communities they serve, and it's needed nowadays. And we'll get into it a little further down the line.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Okay. All right. So just to be clear on like years, as we begin to kind of go through these questions and to know that your lens is coming from what year to 693 days ago? What year did you enter?
So I was transferred in September of 2006 to March 1st of 2020. I've been involved in different facets of community policing. It started with then captain of the 5th Precinct, Sheila Fitz Coley, who then went on to become the director eventually. And I just picked up the baton from the Vanessa Davises, rest in peace, Zaid Braswells, Leon Herbert, who actually did the very, very first neighborhood watch 30 some odd 35 years ago. So
Hmm.
I just picked up the baton and updated it and moved forward in that way.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So 2006 up to 2020. So we're looking at
March
community
1st.
21st, right? Right. 2021. Yes. He's
2020, March 1st.
right, right, March 1st. But 2006, right? And the reason why I want to clarify those dates as we move forward in this conversation is because, as you well know, policing has gone through so much evolution, even in the last 2 years. And so, like, the community policing lens that we look from has evolved and is evolving every day and every week, every month. That we want to be clear that in 2006, what were we doing is an important conversation to have. So
Absolutely.
there's a diverse audience in Sidewalk Talk, right? Some people know some of these topics, some don't. Some are experts, some are providers. Let's lay some foundation, right? Can we even start by like defining community policing is a buzzword? That's a buzzword. What is
Mm-hmm.
it, Russell? Define it for us.
Okay, so community policing can be viewed in various ways. It could be something as simple as having a beat cop, street a guy walking on the street or a young lady saying good morning, establishing a rapport. Community policing can be something as simple as um, having Detective Robert Moore and Betty Burrows, uh, detectives, community service officers from the 4th Precinct in the Save a Lot parking lot delivering soup to the public. Matter of fact, some people was actually saying that their soups were so good it was rivaling Heaven's Delight on Elizabeth Avenue. People
Mm-hmm.
knew those officers in a different light.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about Jennifer Bright. She's now Sergeant Bright, taking the initiative for a young man who had been hit with a stray bullet, paralyzed. First thing she did was she made it so that Thanksgiving meal was special, collected everything they needed, and then went so far as to help garner support because the police department provided a specialized van for the young man to get around. His mother acquired a license, was mentored to get a license and drive a license, and ended up facilitating the job just because her initial actions of a critical incident. That's community policing.
Mm.
There are so many more people, and I probably would forget somebody, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but it's been going on for years. Whether it was Zaid Braswell running the referees at the local basketball tournaments, or OG, the coach essential, giving the kids something extra to do, whether it's his high school central basketball team, or his league he would have on in the Hank Aaron Field at the courts on Springfield Avenue. There are many more people that participate in community policing. It's just partnerships throughout the entire community. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so it sounds like partnerships and also service, right? Like
Oh,
just police officers serving in a service capacity, like you said, soups and sports and family work and things like that. I also, would you agree that it's intentional and strategic as to the kinds of service that they would engage in?
well, it's well, we'll get to the strategic part a little further down the line, because it becomes strategic due to the fact that the city is still under consent decree. But these were acts that people were doing um um out of their own volition. There was nothing. It's like a teacher. You bring everybody in the classroom, but the teacher, you don't see the stuff that the teacher comes out of her pocket to facilitate, whether it's extra this, extra that. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing. People were coming out their pocket from way back when, doing whatever they needed to do to help everybody have a little easier life. I noticed when I used to teach grade, um, some kids wouldn't they had let's just say they had an absentee problem. But just knowing that I was coming, and I would always come with gifts and give them some incentive, gave them incentive to come to class and be there for it. And then there was a graduation end of the year, and we had so many people that taught not only the grade program but the DARE program. You had Vanessa Davis, you had Zaid Braswell, you had Brian Johnson, Brian Logan. Just so many people that were doing it not because they were mandated, but because they wanted to do it, to give back to the community,
Mm-hmm.
and that serves different purposes at different times.
Right, right. And so it also sounds like like you said, the teacher comparison is something that was coming from their heart, from their budget, and probably the things they feel most passionate about as
Absolutely.
individuals and as human beings. Like if I feel passionate about, feeding homeless people because I'm not saying any of them they were, but I'm just saying that, like, picking a lane and playing your part is something we talk a lot about on Sidewalk Talk. You can be most passionate about your lane, especially if, when you, again, if you've been homeless and hungry, maybe you're super passionate about feeding the homeless. But then as a police officer, to still be able to serve is
Yes.
is kind of the foundation of that.
Yes,
Okay.
and keep in mind, we talk about community policing, and it is foremost, but at the end of the day, you're a police officer first. So you might have a plan to go and do some community event, and then you get a call where you have to go to a domestic, and it can be violent. And as we just seen in Harlem, I believe it was, two officers lost their lives um, from a domestic. So we always want to we've transformed Newark Police Department, my former job, has transformed from the warrior mentality to the guardian mentality, which means we're not the occupying force. We're a part of the community. We got to act like that. But then the other part of that is, if there's a better job done of harvesting, getting recruits from the neighborhood, there will be a lot more um, cohesion, and that helps with the transparency of what the police department really wants to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I appreciate you bringing up that recruitment piece of that point, right? Because there's a whole process on the recruitment side that advocates can get in on that piece of it to make sure that folks from the community are being recruited properly. That's a great point. And then you said went from warrior to guardian. So where do you think that shift, happened?
Well, many years ago, there used to be. I'm just going to give you an example of the
Mm-hmm.
warrior mentality.
Yes, yes.
Um, let's say the mid to late '90s. There was a Well, we used to call it the train. The train was a series of police cars coming down Pickett Avenue. We'll just pick Avon Avenue,
Mm-hmm.
where some of the unlicensed pharmaceutical specialists like to hang out. But when they saw the train coming, everybody had something else to do because they knew when the train came along, somebody was getting locked up. This, that, and the third, and order was maintained. But we found in the Newark Police Department, I'm still talking as if I'm still employed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we found that over the years you can't arrest your way out of anything. You have to find other solutions. You have to find other ways. You have to figure out why. In the South Ward, you have up Lyons Avenue, the park and the recreation center, and you have one Avon Avenue, which is the Boys and Girls Club, but not much in between. You got to find other ways to get kids involved and adults in different facets so that they'll have other opportunities to see other things
Mm-hmm.
instead of just hanging on the corner, stolen cars, and all of the mischief that comes with it.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said we just can't, and that's been said on a couple different episodes. We can't arrest our way out of situations.
Doesn't work.
Newark Community Street Team talks about arresting a situation, right? Arresting what you're talking about, a condition, right? Enhancing the condition, because arresting our way out of these conditions is not it. So you gave some examples of like community policing best practices where you were kind of talking about the feeding of that kind of the sports stuff. Are there other best practices that we can like wrap our minds around when we're thinking about community policing?
There are a lot of different ones. Now we're not just talking about regular programs; we're talking about just regular stuff. Everybody knows that National Night Out is the first Tuesday in August. You can get to know. Now it just depends on what the directors take. If he wants it individual precincts or just one large event, you have National Night Out. You also
What
have
is the what is the National Night Out?
National Night Out is a night to enforce a partnership between the community and law enforcement. Each town or municipality has a national night out. It's always the first Tuesday in August. And in that case, in Newark, they went both ways. They've had the individual precincts have their own national night out, so you just get to know the people in the community in that immediate precinct. And then they've had the one large one, COVID aside, at like school stadium or Weekway Park, where you have everybody in one location and you get together and it's just not police, it's fire department, public safety, it might be the FBI. You get to see the helicopter. Then you have local businesses that are also in support of this, because when I was in the first precinct, we also had a first precinct business council, so they would participate and give giveaways, whether it was PNC Bank or TD Bank or whoever was in the area. The braiding place on Springfield Avenue, Home Depot was a part of it. We had a very wide selection, and that helps as you can get the businesses to help in the partnerships. It makes things so much easier because now you got the businesses involved. And then fortunately for me, I was blessed. I was picked to go take a training course for GREAT, which is gang resistance education and training, which is just basically pointing out to kids that the choices you make affect you, and that kids have to go through so much going through to and from school that we only focus on what's going on in school, but they got to walk past abandoned buildings,
Mm-hmm.
whoever's on the corner, whatever madness is going on, that people who create mayhem don't really care about. And it's just it's a monumental task, and it takes a whole community, police,
Right.
the
Right.
mayor's office, social workers,
Right.
teachers. Um, you were just talking about one of the things that could be a part of it, just joining the PTA in
Right.
the school. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. Right.
Just giving them a little support in
Right.
school. You
Right.
know that goes a long way.
Right. And so I wonder, just even like the National Night Out is a great example when like circling back to recruitment, right? Like I have young people, especially like kids more so, like not even just young people, like young adults, which is a lot of who I work with, but like children
Hmm.
potentially going to a national night out, right, may have a profound impact on Johnny when he sees the helicopters and the police in a positive light, right? Because also 6-year-old Johnny may have seen the police in a not positive light, right? So we need to balance Johnny's perspective, like his perception.
Absolutely.
But then when like a national night out could be a great recruitment tool as Johnny grows up, that could have an impact on him to the point that he's now saying, "Hey, I want to go do that and serve my own community, and I live here, I'm from here." And then we fill the department up with folk, a whole bunch of Johnnies that
And Jones, don't leave out Jones.
what, last name Jones?
Y'all know Johnny's and Jones, male and female. Got to get everybody.
Is Jones the female version? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Oh yeah, Joan, Joa.
Jones,
Yes.
Jones.
Got it. So yes. But yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yes. And then yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry if I may.
Yeah, yes,
let me
please.
add another part to that. The
Yeah.
Newark Police Department is unique. They have an academy program for kids ages, I want to say 12 to 21, ran by Detective Moore, which is a police academy for kids. I can't, it's slipping me, but you can actually be a part of different things where they learn protocols, procedures, marching. They're given a curriculum that helps, and also for those who decide, let's just say the police department sends their best into the high schools to to recruit, because you have to be 18 to take the test.
Mm-hmm.
You can actually contact George Torres from Hispanic Law Enforcement, or Sergeant Idell Robinson from the Bronze Shields, and they also have programs for people who are looking to take the police test.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're already on the ground. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. They're for the older people, for the older 18 or so, and they also will do the especially with the Bronze Shields, they'll do they'll get you in shape and prepare for the academy, and they will test. They will help you out with some of the actual literature that you need to know and to be guided on, so that if you do go to the youth academy, it'll build upon that. So there are mechanisms in place.
Right.
However,
Yes.
there's one more mechanism that I think needs to be thought about. There's no reason why at some point in time Newark can't have a PAL, police athletically, and bring everybody together.
Absolutely. And so yes, these mechanisms are in place, and as policing evolves, again from kind of the previous episodes from here, as it evolves, I think that leading with community and community voices being the majority of the department, like that should be a part of the reimagine conversation, right? Like, so I think recruitment is a big part of this imagine conversation that I don't think has, it's been brought up, but I appreciate us bringing up in this conversation. So now, like along those same lines, right? What are examples of like where community policing could be used, but it's not, especially as a peer-to-peer trainer, right? Like you having trained your peers in community policing, are there certain situations, not specific, but just in general, right? Situations where you said to yourself, you know what, a community policing approach could have been used there, and like it wasn't.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, just simply put, it could just be the way that the officer talks to somebody.
Yes.
When
Yes.
people, when officers go to a scene, um, that last job is supposed to stop. Whatever the last job that they had is supposed to stop, and now you're starting with a new job.
Supposed to.
So a lot of times you're taught in the academy, and thank God I went to the Newark Police Academy. You're supposed to start low, and then you elevate. But when you already start getting out the car, elevated up here, then there's nowhere to go. You can't bring it back down. So sometimes it's just simply put, the way that you talk to somebody, your demeanor. And sometimes when you go to jobs, they just want to vent, and so instead of us just cutting them off, saying, "Yeah, I know what happened, this, that, and the third," let them talk, let them get it all out, and then give them a quality solution to the issue. Now, the flip side of it is, if you're a police officer and you get out the car for whatever reason, and you got somebody standing on your car dancing on a Newark police car, there is no community policing that you can do except getting that person down off the car. If they're crazy enough to get off, then they get handled like they're crazy. So unfortunately, it's all about safety.
Hmm.
And police officers,
But then to your point, in some of those escalated situations, a calm officer tone can
yes,
go a very, very long way. And you're basically saying that should be attempted first. Like there should be several community policing tactics used in less danger, right? Which I can understand that. Like imminent danger, somebody on a car is not necessarily imminent danger. So certain things can be used first, right? To
there
de-escalate.
are levels. There are levels to policing.
Exactly.
You got to
Yes.
go through the
Yes.
levels. However, a lot of times because everything goes viral, you don't know what the officer was told in dispatch, or what he now. It's not even what they're told; it's what they read in the comments about the job.
Mm-hmm.
The person, and this is what I used to explain to the people that took the block watch. It depends on how you report the crime, because you're not talking directly to a dispatcher,
Yes.
you're talking to a call taker, and the call taker interprets what you say, and then they transcribe it, put it in a computer, and it goes to a dispatcher, and of course it's prioritized.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a family argument, like let's just say, um I won't give an address,
No.
but
Yeah.
there's a there at one time there was a certain person in the fourth precinct, which ended up turning into the west, which ended up turning into the first precinct, where there was a mother and son that argued 4 or 5 times a week, and it was automatically a domestic, and actually it was just a disagreement, and she would get so fed up with him about certain things, he'd get fed up, they would just call the police. And so, after a while, I think at the time the captain counted out in a period of 6 months, there was something like, I don't know, I'm giving a guesstimate. There was like 246 calls at that residence for that same thing. And after a while, you know, the dispatchers are like, okay, you got to go to such and such, and you automatically know that that's an issue.
Yes.
You automatically know that.
246 times later. Yeah.
That was just when he went back, because the police
Yeah.
department records everything, so they have the opportunity to go back and see. And he just started from like the beginning of the year to a point, and he
Mm-hmm.
stopped it. And then and then that's also the type of thing where you might need critical intervention with a social worker,
Yes.
because
Yes.
because
Yes.
he was grown, and of course it was a mother's apartment, and too many grown people can't be in the same vicinity.
Yes. Yes.
And that's another thing, that you have a partnership now, and that
Yes.
that location would be like, maybe also have uh licensed clinical social worker
Yes. Which,
come to and
yes.
respond. But keep in mind, that particular building, you had to go through a couple of areas.
Mm,
So you sign that waiver, you can come up with us, or if not, when we deem it safe, maybe we could bring them out to the car,
right.
and but then
Right.
you don't you have to be careful in the circumstances that you put everybody in.
Absolutely. And I appreciate just, I mean, because yes, that 246 calls, the audience is like, what? And yes, bringing up the social worker along this storyline, right? Like the family was having ongoing conflict. The police were called on a regular basis because of a family conflict. Like 246 calls to address that issue, when a social worker, which now the Office of Violence Prevention does have social workers located in precincts, the detention center. They don't yet have social workers responding to scenes, but they do have now social workers where the police can refer, because I'm sure you would agree that police are often called for certain calls that they're not necessarily equipped for, that a social worker is more equipped for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we put that in the front, especially about where we are at this point in 2021. Social workers and credible messengers, right? Individuals for the audience, right? Credible messengers are individuals who are formerly incarcerated or affiliated and have now reformed and are doing public safety. Credible messengers and social workers can do things police cannot. That's it, right? And there are
Absolutely.
certain things that police officers can do that obviously social workers and credible may not. But I think we need to like redefine who can do what. To your point about that story.
Hmm. The credible part, I like, because if you can free up police officers from stuff that
Yeah.
is not really that staying in their lane,
Yes. Yes.
expertise, then it
Yes.
makes it a lot easier for them. It reduces the strain because there's no such thing as a job that's not stressful. Every job has its own stresses.
Mm-hmm.
Police department it's exacerbated because you can go from highs to lows in a matter of minutes. So that goes back to um, when they under the consent decree with the community policing, you try to get everybody to start level headed,
Mm-hmm.
and then as they as whatever's going on elevates, then you elevate.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it easier.
Right.
Um, so they're trying. And matter of fact, I think I saw something that they're trying to um, finish the consent decree, if that's even the word, to say okay, because the police department went from basically when I started the Stone Ages to the 21st century, the
Mm.
21st century. So I mean, we went from the actual typewriters that you had to type and have the ribbon, and then the ribbon. Listen, wait, some of the old timers can tell you if you got up from what you were typing and that ribbon was available, when you got back to the seat, that ribbon was not there. Somebody else was using it.
Mm.
So went from typewriters. I have my guard dog just joined us, just because you heard my voice. You went from typewriters to word processors to now you have the record management system where you can type in a report. So we've
Moved.
moved.
Yes. Yes.
Listen, we went so far. So I'm just so proud that I was a part of it. It was a small portion, and I was the only one that taught community policing. Um, there were approximately 12 um, other instructors, and we rotated depending on the schedules that we worked,
Mm-hmm.
and they did a remarkable job. Now, real quickly,
Mm-hmm.
what people don't know is the community policing program we taught was developed by Virginia Center for Police Innovations, and they're out of Virginia, and they just basically gave us a book. I can't even. It was a binder full of stuff, and then at the time, Captain Donna Robertella and Lieutenant Bird basically custom fitted for the Newark Police Department. So we taught the critical parts because we don't really have to talk too much about when you go into a burglary on the beach.
Right.
That doesn't
So
that
they
that
so they
doesn't
tailored and custom made it for the city of
That's right.
Newark.
Edited it exactly the way it needed to be so that we could teach it to the officers.
Hmm.
You know what
So
I'm saying?
let me cut in right there and just ask you, how receptive was the officers at first? And then like did you find that there was some like resistance at first and then it got better as the years went on?
Well, I only taught 17, 18, and 19. I think we started in 17.
That's a long time though to teach
Yes, yes,
community policing in
yes.
a department that just came under consent decree.
But let me just say, as a dinosaur, I myself was resistant to change, but I
Mm,
taught great for a bunch of years, and I taught the block watch, so I understand how and why it was needed. Most officers understand why it was needed, why we were in the situation we were in, and what we needed to do to correct that. Now, keep in mind, it makes it easier when you have a police officer that's from the community because they can speak frankly without there being any you like hidden agendas.
mm-hmm.
So that kind of made it easier too. And you know, the police department was very careful about who they selected to teach because not everybody has their own lane. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were fortunate that we had 12 people who were outstanding, and I believe that as we left or we moved on and moved out the police department, other people came and took over our spots, covid aside.
Mm-hmm. Like one thing I would ask, and just what was the I guess reaction kind of at large. Again, in these episodes, we're not talking personal about anybody particular. Like we're not talking personal, we're talking systems, right? And
Mhm.
we're talking in general. So one thing I would be curious to know, that I think is more so like school of thought now is that perpetrators are survivors, right? And so like earlier you talked about like the ones causing mayhem, right? Like, and yet the Johnny that we were talking about at the National Night Out, right, may have become that person and then recruiting another Johnny because a lot of that stuff is generational trauma, and
Yeah.
so folks are survivors, and end up getting into the cycle of violence. So like, was that ever kind of, in those years that you were doing that, was that a part of the policing conversation, the community policing conversation?
Um, Not in a major extent. Just we just breezed through it because we had a lot. It was a day course, but it really should have been like 3 days. So we tried to breeze through as many, and then we tried to reinforce with what we did was we taught with examples. So and we give them basic examples. But you do. This is interesting. I'll tell it like this. Um, you would be surprised at the amount of people that, and for good reason, from overseer to officer, have a reason to not trust the police. And then when you have a family member that becomes an officer, how the perception kind of changes because they kind of see a kind of a different side. It's sort of like if you grew up in the same area, the same 8 blocks. You went to elementary, middle school, and high school, and you're on the same corner pretty much your entire life, and then you go somewhere totally different, get on a plane, or you travel cross town by bus and see a different way of life, and you'd be like, wow, I didn't realize up until this point that there was something bigger than what we're going through right now. And for what I can see, and I also can attain. But the interesting thing is with the grade program, it was about choices. If you start early in element, we had an elementary school program and a middle school program. You sort of could see the wheels turning a little bit, and you're not going to get everybody, but you're going to get enough people to say, but listen, maybe I want to. It doesn't have to be police officer, be a firefighter, could be a Secret Service agent, could be a CIA agent, could be a pilot.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? There are many opportunities, and contrary to popular belief, some of the people that are on the corner are highly intelligent. It's
Of
just that
course.
some,
They're
some of the
PhD brilliant.
absolutely
They're
some of the,
entrepreneurs.
but it's the options. A lot of them don't have the options available to them to see. Listen, I can take this and leave this alone and make money this way. Do it the correct way. And community policing solutions is another bridge to whether it's businesses or whatever to help get them started.
Right. And like you said earlier, you said, we need to be able to go out to the community and show folks what their options are and to provide resources. And then also, I'm just going to add, when I talk about perpetrators being survivors, is healing from trauma. Because folks could have all the resources they want, but if my trauma tells me that I'd rather have power than be powerless and re-traumatized, then I'm going to choose power, right? Regardless of the resource you give me. But that's because of the trauma I've been through. That kind of blinds my decision-making process, or, taints the decision-making process. So absolutely, to give options, but to also to heal. Going back to that point about the police officer coming in at a high tone, right? So EJUSA does this trauma to trust training. You've heard of, yeah. You probably participated, right?
I participated in it, and my good friend Alteric Best was one of the trainers, and it was I can't remember the young lady's name. She went to Equal Justice USA. Tall, I can't remember her name. She was actually there. I think that's who facilitated it, and then we took it at
definitely been to several of the trauma to trust trainings. And so when I went, there was where we said we're not allowed to say who said what because it's confidential, but that we are supposed to take certain ideas out and report out about what we've learned. There was an officer there who talked about a baby dying in his arms on a shift, and yes, he had to go to the next job and the job after that and the job after that. So to your point, like we want to clarify misconceptions on Sidewalk Talk, right? At the end of the day, officers carrying trauma throughout their day, right? It's, not to say it's an excuse to come out of the car escalated, but mental health, and we're not going to open up that can of worms, but the mental health of officers, the public, we need to advocate for them to be able to get the mental health services that they need without getting in trouble and getting their badge and the gun taken and all this. We need to advocate for the officers to get the support they need.
Listen, I'll do you one better. When I go to Trenton, I'm not running. Let that be known. I'm not advocating. I'm gonna take you to Trenton,
Yeah.
and I want what you said to be heard by legislatures, because
Yeah.
I believe 25 years is too long to be a police officer. Now they got to do 30 years. I think it should be 20 and out like New York, and you just, go on. Because when you're working in an urban setting, urban community, there are things that
Yeah.
you get a certain amount of PTSD.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was fortunate. I wasn't in patrol through long periods. I've had friends graduate 95 July 15th, 1995, and March 1st, 2020, they went patrol their whole time. So imagine the stuff that they seen over that 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And as a community-based social worker who specifically works with individuals before, during, and after incarceration, right? I won't compare myself to police because they see like 8 dead bodies a day, right? Like I'm not on that. But we as trench workers, we see a lot of disturbing things in our day. And no, mental health is super important for frontline workers. We'll definitely leave that there. And I do think that that needs to be a systems change, which is a great segue into our next question about like, now let's take it up from like the sidewalk and the street, but taking it up to systems. What would you say is a barrier, like a systems barrier to community policing? What is in the way? What system is in the way of implementing it the way you think it should be implemented?
That's a great question. I think that right now the systems have helped facilitate it, or facilitate more of a community policing aspect. And you got to understand. I think I said it earlier. We went from when we went to the Newark Police Academy, we were basically warriors, and then we slowly had an evolution into being a guardian. And what's interesting is everybody knows about the '67 riots. I'm not going to go too far into it, but everybody knows that two officers, white officers, beat a black cab driver, and instead of they beat him bad, and instead of taking him to the hospital, it was a bogus traffic stop. They took him to the precinct, which facilitated people going to the precinct, this, that, and the third. The riots came about. The Newark Police Department was actually called in off the street. National Guard and state troopers took over, and even today, you don't know how many rounds were fired at Newarkers by National Guardsmen
Mm,
during the riots,
mm.
causing the most damage. Now, fast forwarded to we'll say spring of 2020, when, if you notice, right before the election, there were different outbreaks
Yes. Yes.
of mischief
Unrest.
going on.
Unrest.
Yeah,
Right.
unrest,
Yeah.
unrest,
Yeah.
unrest.
In cities
Where
across
where
America.
where if you notice, overnight piles of bricks were showing up in strategic places.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now I was retired by then, um, and Facebook Live tells a lot.
Yes, it does.
So where the riot started was 1017th Avenue. Then it was the fourth precinct or the West District. And then it became the first precinct. So a lot of police resources went to the first precinct. They ring the precinct, and you seen a mob going down Clinton Avenue. Now here's the interesting part: from warriors to guardians, the community, No Community Street
Yep.
Team,
Yep.
Donna Jackson
Yep.
said, "Wait a minute, we'll chastise our officers, but we don't need anybody from outside
Yes.
coming in and start no shenanigans." I have other words, but we use
Yep.
shenanigans.
Yep.
And they checked the people so well that the people were shook. Now, I wasn't there for this, but I was told that a couple of the rabble rousers were cornered, and they actually told that they were in from out of town. They were brought in by whomever.
Planes, trains, and buses.
Yes, planes, trains, automobiles. Now, the interesting part was you talking about a community, the unity in the community. Donna Jackson,
Many people out there. We don't even got to go to the names because
yeah,
there's
yeah,
many
yeah, they protect
community
the officer,
workers. Yep.
the
Yep.
community workers.
Yep.
Said, listen, wait a minute, why are you bringing this mayhem here? And they checked them, and it really they de-escalated.
Yes.
But if there was going to be any fisticuffs, it would have been by the people that stopped it, and they found out that you just can't come into Newark and start all kind of madness and think that what happened 50 years ago was going to go on, because we've evolved.
Right. Right.
Not only the
Right.
partnership in the community, but the police department as well.
Right. And evolve to that community based approach, right? Because it's a great example of you bringing that up. And for more context, it was during the George Floyd protests here in Newark, and we were watching every other city burn, right? And Newarkers said, you're not doing that to our city because we love our city. Right. And like you said, we could deal with our own police. You don't got to come in and burn our city to the ground. We're not with that. That's not even how we express our anger or our passion. That's not what's happening. Right. And so from a systems perspective, folks were boots on the ground. Boots on the ground to the point that could police have a hand? Yeah, but in a very overwhelming, probably extreme way. Whereas boots on the ground community members made, like, de-escalated that whole thing, and we did not have one incident in the city of Newark because of boots on the ground. And I appreciate that. Yes, that's community-based support and working supplementally together. Nobody's trying to replace the police. Mm-hmm. But to work supplemental and say, hey, what can you do better than me? And what can I do better than you? Let's work together.
Partnerships.
Yes, absolutely. So internally in the police department, right, what would you say is a systems barrier to community policing? Or was it doesn't?
Well, I'll say what was. I won't say now. I'll say was, and I'm talking about not my last 3 years, but prior to trying to arrest your way out of everything, just to get numbers, and we found that just doesn't work.
That numbers was the system.
Doesn't work. It creates conflict, and it escalates the amount of confrontation that you might have when it's truly not needed.
Right. Which is, I want to bring this man who's sleeping on a public bench to a shelter, community policing. However, the numbers say that because he's being unruly, then I need to arrest, even though he has mental health issues, and then he goes to the county jail with mental health issues. But to your point, to meet the stat, like the numbers.
Yeah, but many years ago, we really didn't do the homeless. I mean, that's like a whole different other situation, and we're lucky that you had different shelters. The problem is they get into a shelter and there's mayhem going on in there. So a lot of times they were like, you know what, I don't even want to go to that shelter if I can't do X, Y, and Z. I take my, and it's bitterly cold. So in the last, I would say 7 to 10 years, the police department, the fire department, I'll say the Department of Public Safety instituted at certain times with certain temperatures, you could help facilitate getting people from point A to point B, so they'll have shelter in the heat, in the cold conditions or whatever's going on, and they would make sure that they were all right. That was converted JFK and many other shelters throughout the city. Right. That's under I know they did it under the current mayor, and I want to say it probably the previous administration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
but just the choice that an officer should have in a situation that is not necessarily arrest worthy, right? I understand that there's certain things that have to, like certain situations, an arrest has to occur. But other situations where he or she doesn't have to go that route.
Absolutely.
And they can go the community policing route, but the internal, like, department system says, like, no, you need to go about it this other way.
Well, I've been fortunate. I actually haven't encountered that. As far as because it was determined a long time ago that you just can't arrest your way out of it. Mm-hmm. So it just wasn't. He's homeless. We throw him back in the car, throw him to Green Street, because nobody wants to go to Green Street. Even the officers, when it was open, didn't want to go to Green Street. Yeah. So that I really can't say that it was an internal thing.
Well, the numbers, but you said the numbers. So the numbers is an internal thing, right?
Yeah, the numbers can be part of everything. It can be just summonses or whatever. Mm-hmm. Get stats up or whatever. But just the arrest, just arresting a homeless person for For what? I mean, when you think about it, many years ago, there was loitering in the city of Newark. The ACLU came, sued the city, and loitering was taken off the books. You can't
Mm,
arrest for loitering.
mm,
So, I guess that would have been, and that was years ago.
right.
Now, keep in mind, a lot of homeowners are a little upset because they feel that there shouldn't be large congregation of people on the corners or in front of their houses. And, Newark police will, we give the warnings, you can't really stand around, but it's as long as they're not obstructing public passage, it's not much they can do. But homeowners start getting upset because the first thing they say is, well, you don't allow this in whatever, you just pick a town.
Right,
But
right,
there's different things involved there as well.
right. But that's a good example of a legislative approach to removing a barrier,
Yes.
right? Like if now I understand the loitering is a little more complicated, right, and nuanced. If we were to unpack that, unpack that.
There are still people with the word loitering in front of the buildings,
Yeah,
like almost
yeah,
20 years
yeah.
later.
But somebody advocated for that. Like you said, the
Absolutely.
ACLU
Mhm.
advocated for that to not be an arrestable or even
Deductible.
summonsable
Yeah, exactly.
infraction or
Exactly.
violation. And
Mhm.
so that's important just to look at some of that legislation and systematic macro level stuff that we can remove the barriers to allow officers to be able to use this approach. So, what is like an average citizen, right? An average citizen, what can
Nobody in Newark
we
is
do?
average.
What?
Nobody in Newark is average. They're
That's all.
all above
We're all special in our own ways. But
all
like
special.
sidewalk talk definitely talks about like not only providers and like teachers or who workers or whatever that serve the community, but also like the grandmother, right, the
Mhm.
father, and just like average citizen that wants to contribute to this part of public safety. And they say,
Mhm.
you know what, I want more community policing. It went from warrior to guardian, but it's still not good enough,
Mhm.
right? What can like the average citizen do to like make sure that this is a standard in our community? How can they push the envelope?
Okay, so I'm going to say it. First of all, if you live in a community, you should know who your district leader is.
Yes, yes,
That's first and foremost. You should,
yes.
and remember, there are male and female district leaders, and in certain sections of the city, there are Democrat and Republican district leaders. Republicans have their own slate. They can go up to the fourth floor of the clerk's office and get the whole list, which they are elected to 2-year terms. So let's start with knowing who your elected official is. I mean, most people know the council people, and while I'm bringing this up,
But teach your kids the council people too, because these
oh,
teenagers don't know.
absolutely. And keep in
Yeah.
mind, for some reason, the precincts aren't district along the ward lines. They
Mm,
have their own boundaries. So just because you're in the first precinct doesn't mean you're actually part of the central ward, if that makes sense.
mm,
Like the fifth precinct, the South Ward extends all the way over to West Side Park.
mm,
But the precinct, you should know your boundaries. You should really know your neighbors. A lot of times when I was teaching community policing, the neighborhood block watch, you get to know your neighbors. Pick a day of the week, maybe once a month, where you go and for the people who are homeowners or renters, go stand on your porch for 5 minutes at a certain period of time, showing the solidarity in the area. I mean, I've had some communities that were outstanding. Hyde Park Gardens, Gerard Place, Yates Avenue, uh, South 13th Street, Lower Shepherd. And the list goes on where people always went the extra mile. Like they would call me or whoever the commander was, um, say, listen, such and such is going on, and we're going to keep an eye on it for you just to make sure because we don't need any problems in our area. Yates Avenue was brilliant about that, where people would try to beat the light going up Hawthorne Avenue. They would cut down and cut up Yates Avenue and try to beat the light. And they was like, listen, and just that little bit of information. Sometimes cameras doesn't catch everything. So just a little tidbit during the precinct council or whatever your community meeting is to give uh, tidbits of information is always helpful. Also, what else could be done?
Can I ask a
Oh,
question right there?
Oh,
Can
sure.
I
Go ahead.
real quick? My question is again here on this platform. I try to ask questions that folks would ask out loud if they had a platform or if they weren't scared to ask the questions. Right. This is the question about fear. Fear of when it comes to the block watch. Right at that time, but like now, fear of the offenders in the neighborhood, and also fear of holding police accountable, right? Like, because now if I'm advocating for community policing as well, I might be scared that if I go try to hold this officer accountable, that police have a lot of power. And so what do you tell people about fear on either side of the police and offenders?
So the police department, I don't have the information in front of me. They have an app now where you can actually the neighbor next door, or there's a police department app where you can actually get on it and type in something and it remains anonymous. You don't even have to pick up the phone and call this 973-733-6000 number. You can use the app, give the information, and it goes directly to the people in charge, whether it's investigations or Crime Stoppers or
About
whoever.
police misconduct?
Oh,
About
police.
police misconduct?
Oh,
Or
police
about things
misconduct.
happening in the neighborhood?
But things happen in the neighborhood.
Got
Police
it.
misconduct is still internal affairs. It's just internal affairs is not where it used to be. It's in another place where it's there are no police officers in that area except for people from internal affairs. And those complaints already they go down there for that, or they call to get in touch and they'll reach out to you.
Mhm.
That's something separate. I'm
And we
talking
also
about
do have, I think we have a citizen review board like hotline, which I'll like put in the YouTube link because I don't have that in front of me either. But here in Newark, we do have like a hotline that you're able to call about police misconduct, and I do believe it's anonymous as well.
I believe it is as
Yeah,
well. Just
yeah,
give the information or whatever it is.
yeah. And
Or
so that
what might
question has to be asked, right? Like,
or what or what might be believed is police misconduct.
true. And it can be sorted out, right? Like it can be sorted out. But as an advocate, right, if we're trying to advocate for community policing and we feel an officer was not acting in the community's best interest, then you do have recourse. Like,
You
and
have
then
to
it will
do
be investigated and sorted out. But we should be feel empowered to participate in the system. Yeah.
in all aspects,
Yeah.
all aspects.
Yeah. And then you said, so you know your district leader, know where your precincts, what the
The
boundaries of
boundaries
your
are.
precincts are. Okay. Know your
You should
council
know,
people.
you should also know who your community service officer is and your precinct captain.
Got it. Got it. What can a community service officer, why would I need to know that person?
Well, that person was me 693 days ago, and
Yeah.
that's the person that you
You want
might
to
want.
know a Russell around your way.
Yeah, Robert Moore, Betty Burrows, Vanessa Davis, rest in peace, Zayd Braswell, Leon Herbert. There's many people that you have to find out now who serves in that capacity. Somebody that they're always looking for to reach out to the community. I mean, everybody knows about the coffee with a cop and this, that, and the other, but there are other things that can be used in your favor to help get what you need to get. So that when it comes to National Night Out, you say, "Oh, that's such and such. That's such and such." Me personally, I was blessed because I taught in like 21 schools, so I had a rapport with the principals. And then when the kids grew up, even though I left teaching in middle and elementary, if there was an issue as they were grown, they would say, "Oh no, that's Detective Thomas. That's Officer Thomas. Let me tell you what really happened." And he'd be like, "Oh, stop right there. Let's slow it down a little bit."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they were happy to see somebody that they knew,
Yeah.
not somebody they knew because they came in and arrested somebody.
Exactly.
Somebody knew on a different level.
Exactly. So for us to know our community service officers, which many of us may not even have known that position existed, right? But let's get to know our local community service officer and talk with them. See, let them know you know them, see what they can do for you and the things you're trying to do. So, on Sidewalk Talk, we do our every guest is given an opportunity, Russell, to give us your top 3 marching orders. Although throughout this conversation, you have given us many. You have given us many calls to action. In fact, you just gave us one about that piece. But what are your top 3 marching orders?
Wow, there are so many. I think first and foremost, they should investigate If they don't already have a block association or tenant association, look to start one. Neighborhood block watch, and get to know the leaders in the area, whether it's Republican or Democratic district leaders. I mean, listen, you have to vote your interests, but if you know all sides, then it makes it a lot easier for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
And
we
there's
all live here in this neighborhood, regardless how we vote. Like,
listen,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if
yeah,
especially if in the South Ward, I'm not going to say the name, but there's an organization. When a light pole is down on Elizabeth Avenue, it's on
yes,
Facebook. They talk about it,
yes,
and
yes.
that's what you need. Now you need that in the Central Ward and in the West Ward. The West Ward has UVSO. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and let me tell you, there were two officers up there. Was I got to say his name, Mike Beasley and George Torres. I talked about George a little earlier, who's the president of Hispanic law enforcement. But Michael Beasley was also instrumental up there in the Upper West Ward, where they did such a good job. When they were actually moved from their posts, the community got them put back
Mm-hmm.
because they were approachable. They were outside the schools. None of the shenanigans went on, and everybody knew them. Now, when they left, it's no telling what went on. But while they were working those hours, they stepped up, and the community appreciated and they saw it. Just because the community doesn't say nothing doesn't mean they don't know.
Right,
And
right,
and Mike Beasley was an example of that.
right. So your first one is to investigate whether you have a block association, and if you don't, start one.
Yeah,
Yes,
or tenant association.
or tenant. Okay. What would be the second call to action?
Look to become part of the process in finding solutions, whether it be Block Watch or Citizen Clergy Academy. Um, find out what options we're in the COVID era, but find out what else Newark Police Department is offering to the public. Like they have the Citizen Clergy Academy where you actually go through you see the whole spectrum of the police department, in which at some point in time you get to go into the simulator. The simulator, for those who don't know, is you actually have a weapon and they give you scenarios on the board, and you actually get to see, yes, you get to see, everybody can tell a police officer how to do a job, but not everybody can do the job. And
Mm-hmm.
you get to
Mm-hmm.
go on the simulator and see all of the variables that can come into play, and you don't have 2 or 3 days to think about it. You have to react.
Right.
The Citizen Clergy Academy, they were doing big numbers. You can actually, and they show you everything from how you report a crime to the 911 call center and all
Right.
that stuff. It gives you the whole scope of operations. So become a part of your police department. Most precincts have a citizen council, and become a part of that, or at least show interest and get your captain's name. Let's start with the captain's name or community service officer's name, because once you get the captain's name and you have dialogue, you establish a dialogue with the captain, the community service officer will be reaching out to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last call to action.
Oh wow, the last call to action. Did I give you three?
Was
Okay,
that three?
you
It's
give me
fine.
all. I think the last call to action would be for let me split it up. For the youths, let's find a program that helps them uh, in something they're interested in, whether it's basketball or football. Now, mind you, my good friend Wally Moses has the Moses Stevenson Boxing for Life Academy at 205 Spruce Street, where he's there, I guess, 7 days a week, and he's the grandfather of Shakur Stevenson. So he's trained champs. He knows what it takes. That's something else can be delivered. Now, it just doesn't have to be that. It could be double dutch jumping with what's her name? We call her Little Bit. She's an AKA Andrea Mason.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
maybe become a part of the NCST, or helping
But
to
to
develop.
refer a youth, like to refer a youth, because that ends up helping the police, right? If you mentor and wrap your arms around a young person, please, if everyone gets one or two and refers a youth to something that interests them and connect them to an organization that serves them, that essentially is helping them to avoid interacting with law enforcement.
In the wrong way.
So help the police by getting getting not just young people, but those who need their arms need our arms to be wrapped around them. So that's good. Just finding their interests. You mentioned boxing, double dutch, things like that, but to refer a youth to an organization. That's good. So, where can folks find you? Like, what do you do now, 693 days later? What do you do now? How can folks support your work? Where can they find you?
Okay, so aside from the consulting, you can find me at Community Policing Solutions, all one word, at gmail.com. You can find me on Legends with Russell Thomas at the Hub Life Radio. You can give me a call. Well, don't give me a call. You can send me a text, 973-73. Oh, excuse me. I was about to give my office number from 693 days ago. 973-699-4559. That's Community Policing Solutions phone number. Leave a message, text, email.
Okay.
There are ways. I'm still in the community. Uh, with COVID, a lot of things are done on Zoom. I've started. I'm actually going out to the city, but you got to be careful nowadays. Rest in peace to Khalif Majid, another police officer who was instrumental. He was good with his hands. COVID. So we have to be careful out there. I'm not saying everybody needs to be vaccinated, but you need to take precautions. This is not over. You need to do what you have to do to protect your family and keep everybody safe.
Right, right.
I gave you plenty of platforms that you can reach out to me,
Yes.
and I'm extending you an invitation. Let's wait till the COVID die down. I have you on Legends, and then I can give you a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
It won't be as professional as all it is, but we'll figure something out. It's sort of like
That
a
sounds good.
freelance.
No, that
But
sounds good. That sounds good. I'm totally down. Definitely open for that. So definitely you can support Russell's work. That is, continuing, retired, but definitely continuing. This is definitely a passion in his heart, clearly. And so before you go, we appreciate you, Russell. We appreciate the blood, sweat, and tears that you've already put into this work for 25 years, right? And so
Me
like
and so many others.
yeah, and I know because throughout this conversation, you have definitely given the light to other people, which I respect. But I want you to know that, like, we appreciate the impact that you've had on hundreds and hundreds of people's lives that may have been trajectory changers. Like, their life is different because of you. And so we salute you for your work and your passion, your heart in in this work, and we appreciate you for sharing your wisdom with us.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. I look
All right.
forward to it.
Bye bye. Well, family. Well. That was a dynamic conversation. That's a dynamic conversation. Just, asking basic foundational questions and asking questions that nobody else wants to ask and getting details on, like, what do we really mean by this? And what does this really look like? And what if it doesn't go the way that it's supposed to go? Like, where does accountability come into play? Straight from the horse's mouth, essentially, from an officer who kind of knows these things. So the summary of his calls to action was: number one, investigate whether you have a block association or a tenant association, and if you don't, start one. Right? Again, investigate what we have, and if you don't have that, start one. Take the initiative as a community member. He said, get to know our neighbor. Right? We can't abolish police and we don't even want to talk to our neighbor. Like, that's my own personal criticism of that school of thought, right? We have to step up in order to be able to engage in the community as we need to, right? Then number two, he said, let's look at solutions. Right? Go, kind of go into the police department, know who the captain is, know where your precinct is, know your community resource, community service officer, find out what they can do, what you can do for them, how we can work together to be able to ensure that the police is serving the community the best way, and the community is then able to assist the police, which is his third call to action. Look, we can avoid our loved ones in some cases. That's a bigger conversation, right? But in some cases, avoiding interaction with law enforcement if we are then embracing our loved ones and wrapping arms around them, referring them to youth organizations, giving them options, programming and decolonizing our minds, our own minds, as well as those we serve and those who we love. So let's kind of get to work. Let's get to work. If you would like to stay connected with Russell, he does do consulting and training with the Community Policing Solution. Right here is the phone number. And then he also has a radio show on that Hub Life radio. Again, shout out to the Hub. And so we can tune into that and just kind of stay connected to the work. So again, my name is Aaliyah Berry. I currently work as a consultant with Seeds and Berries, you doing program development, training, and direct clinical services in schools, nonprofits, and the government sector. So to keep in touch with me, you can follow Seeds and Berries on Facebook, Instagram, myself on LinkedIn. And if you missed this episode live, you can check it out on the YouTube channel along with the previous 17 episodes. Family, we are at the end of season 2. I had no idea we would get this far when this vision was first started, but we had 2 episodes left of season 2, and I have sat down with some very dynamic guests, and so definitely check out the YouTube channel. You'll see all the different conversations we've had and all the different guests that we have sat down with. Again, you can find out more information about me at seedsandberries.com, and then like, tag, and share this broadcast for impact. Again, not for popularity, but for impact. We feel like we had an important message that needs to, kind of get around. And so this was the 18th episode. The 19th and 20th episode is when, all in February, right? We're going to talk about activism because all season we've been talking about strength, strategy, and service. And we have been challenging folks to get involved and move some of these things forward. Okay, Aaliyah, yeah, but how? Yeah, but how? I had 2 awesome guests lined up, from sidewalk activism all the way up to macro level systems advocacy. And so we're going to explain exactly how to move some of these things forward. This is Sidewalk Talk. Pick a lane, play your part. Pick a lane, play your part. Thank you for your support on tonight. We'll see you in February. Have a good night.